Welcome to Accelerate Science Now, where we sit down with innovators shaping policy, research, and industry to ask one big question: how do we make science move faster and work better for everyone? Today, I'm joined by Dan Correa, CEO of the Federation of American Scientists, an organization driving policy innovation on everything science from AI and climate to healthcare and national security. We talked about why government needs more policy entrepreneurs, how fellowships and big sprints can unlock change, and why keeping science at the heart of decision making matters now more than ever. Enjoy the show. Today's guest is Dan Correa, a leading voice at the intersection of science, technology, and public policy. Dan is the CEO of the Federation of American Scientists, an organization dating back to the Second World War with a charter to advance science and technology policy to benefit humanity. Under his leadership, FAS is helping government move faster and smarter on big challenges from climate resilience and biothreats to AI, healthcare, and innovation policy. Before taking the helm at FAS, Dan founded the Day One Project, a nonpartisan hub generating cutting-edge science and technology policy ideas, bringing together top technical experts to shape future-ready policies. He also served in the White House under President Obama, where he was Assistant Director for Innovation Policy at the Office of Science and Technology Policy, driving hundreds of millions into civic tech, R&D commercialization, education, and entrepreneurship. Whether he's advising policymakers, building coalitions, or rethinking how government taps into technical expertise, Dan's work is driven by a core question: how can we unlock science and innovation to improve lives? So thank you so much for joining us, Dan. I'm excited to learn more.
Thanks for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Great. So there's obviously a lot to delve into, but I kind of want to start from the very beginning. Was there anything specific, maybe a certain problem or policy idea that sparked your interest and made you want to pursue a career in science and technology policy?
Yeah, I actually coming out of college, I was reflecting on a career in public service or public policy. And the issues that compelled me were related to the place I grew up. So I'm from upstate New York, Schenectady to be specific, where I'm not sure if you've been there, but it is a shell of the town that it once was.
Oh,
100 years ago, this was like a vibrant, bustling metropolis, and most of that was is owed to the fact that General Electric had put its headquarters there. And I had seen firsthand the aftermath in a Rust Belt town, um, of what it looks like when that presence had shrunk dramatically. And so I wanted to help places like Schenectady find their footing, and thought that public policy was a good place to start. And in particular, the thing that I latched onto at the time, coming out of school, was just the power of economic revitalization through emerging technology, new sectors, and economic transformation around universities and entrepreneurship. And so that's how I found my way into science and technology. And I've been kind of on related journeys ever since. But that was what brought me in, and I started working at a think tank called the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation in its first year back in 2006.
wow, that's such an interesting way. So it seems the entire time it wasn't like a fascination with technology. Perhaps it's always been about improving communities and improving people's lives. I actually noticed when you're the same time that you're at the White House, you were also a fellow with an organization called Fuse. Could you tell me a bit more about that?
Absolutely. So I actually came into public service on a fellowship. And so the organization is called Fuse Corps, which takes um, mid-career experts and places them across the country in roles where they can be agents of change in public service. And so this was an avenue for me to find a pathway into the White House. There are not that many jobs at the White House. This is like a pretty compelling way to actually find a role through a fellowship. And so that's how I got my foot in the door, and it proved to be a really transformative experience. I stuck around beyond the fellowship and worked in a couple different capacities there. But I would say that that experience, which was an opportunity afforded to me by one of these unconventional pathways, which have I think are critically important, the fellowship pathway.
Hmm.
Um, it was an opportunity that I view as like a, a radicalization moment for me in my professional career and outlook and work, and has informed the issues that I work on and how I work on them ever since.
That's so great. And I had actually, that makes so much sense because I'd noticed in looking through kind of everywhere you've been, it seems like you've started fellowship programs, from the White House to now quite a few at FAS. Do you have a favorite fellowship program that you've started?
Well, I would say that our impact fellowship is the fellowship that I'd say has had the most reach here at FAS. And the idea is actually quite straightforward, but I think it's deeply important, which is um, we work with federal and now state partners who have critically important priorities that they are capacity constrained from delivering on. And the capacity that they are in search of is often some sort of technical expertise. And so we at FAS help them design and curate opportunities for talented experts to go in and serve and make a difference through this fellowship program.
Huh.
And what excites me about this is that um, we are not looking to push a square peg into a round hole, because that's not really how government works. There are visionary leaders in government institutions at all levels, and the work that they are trying to do is often among the hardest that you can imagine. And what's holding them back is implementation capacity and expertise in many cases. And so we like to think of this fellowship as um, it can be a but for cause of unlocking actual progress on everything from AI to wildfire policy, to STEM and high skill immigration, just to name a few of the topics that our fellows have had a chance to work on at the federal level.
Wow, that's really cool. So you have like this whole cohort of scientists and you're trying to figure out what are, I guess, are you finding bottlenecks or are people coming to you with bottlenecks and saying, hey, this is the exact kind of person we think we need? Or are you guys helping make that determination?
It's actually a little of both. I think
Hmm.
one of the things um, that that busy, overworked senior policymakers often find is that they have a challenge and they need a little bit of help figuring out how to solve it.
Hmm.
So in some cases, they're like, I need the foremost wildfire expert in the country. Can you go find that person for us? Like, we know exactly what they want to do. We say, great. In other cases, it's actually quite a bit more around a particular problem. Like, we've got um, deep process challenges around a particular priority. I'm not sure exactly what kind of expertise we need, and or even to how to pitch this in a way that would be compelling to anybody in the real world outside government. Because I don't know if you've taken a cruise through the normal government hiring process that you might find on USAjobs .gov,
It's a
but
black box.
most yeah most of these roles are like described in a language that seems to be anything but English, and
Right.
so we're like looking for help to both reach into communities and talk about why this work is so important um, in real terms that might land with people. And so when I say that, like my own experience in government was like a radicalization moment for me, it's as much about the fact that I've gone on to do this a bunch of work on a bunch of fellowship programs as it is about this core realization, having worked in the policy world at a think tank before this,
Hmm.
and then going in and serving, I realized that the actual bottlenecks and the issues that were holding us back and were most important for where I should be focusing my attention, were somewhat different than what I'd thought before.
Interesting.
Um, it isn't that necessarily we have like a shortage of ideas. It's that we need sharper instincts and expertise on how to make them come alive. And I think that that has informed everything that I've done since. And that's how I end up doing things like building fellowship programs, because that's just fundamentally enabler for making government work better,
Hmm.
which I think we actually need a much larger community of people in Washington focused on collectively.
Yes, definitely. And I think in a similar vein to all these fellowship programs you've started to help government, I would say another one that seems really exciting and in that same vein is the Day One Project. Could you explain like what that is, how it got started, and maybe some of the successes you've had?
Sure. Um, so the Day One Project, we started this. It's hard to even remember, but back in 2019, and the idea was similarly to what I was just describing, like coming out of um, the federal government, this core realization that um, the policy community in Washington and the community of people in science and technology, whether they're in academic labs or elsewhere, often don't really know where the front door is in order to inform policy and be agents of change. So if you like, um, you know, if you talk to folks at a think tank or at a lab, they're not often conversant with the types of inside knowledge that people in government thrive on. Like there are certain times in the calendar year when policymakers want to hear a budget idea, right? Because they're working on the budget.
Hmm.
But, if you go to them the week after they've submitted the president's budget, they don't really wanna talk about your idea about what should be in the budget, right? It's just not time. And like, I mean, that's like a very specific and concrete example, but I think the insight is like broadly applicable.
Hmm.
And so we built the Day One project initially to bring and make legible to many more people across our broad community of people that work in AI and science, climate, et cetera, um, how they could take an idea that they have that is compelling enough and rooted in some technical expertise, and how that could actually inform and shape policy at a moment that really, um, where there actually were real big policy windows, the 2020 election and the transition after that. So we ran an entire process, um, that gathered. Our goal was to gather the 100 best ideas. We had no idea if this would work, because what
Hmm.
we were asking people to do was to volunteer their time to write something, allow us, the policy experts, self-identified policy experts, to tell them that, hey, we really like your idea, but actually it needs a lot of work. So can you do maybe like a whole rewrite? And we're going to ask you to do it maybe 3 more times, right? For free.
Yeah. Yeah.
And at the end, we're going to publish this idea on a website that is nobody's ever heard of. But trust us, like we know how this process works, and it'll be useful. And so this was sort of started on a hope and a prayer at a time when we were trying to just prove out this model,
Hmm.
because we thought that it was needed. And that initial experience around that election transition and what ensued,
Hmm.
um, was it succeeded beyond our wildest imagination. We ended up publishing like several hundred ideas, many of which ended up in the hands of the Biden transition.
Hmm.
Um, Somebody told me that they were being passed around like candy because they were like informed by how policy actually works and like targeted and specific. Um, and ultimately a bunch of those ideas became real. So things like ARPA-H, which was President Biden's signature proposal in the health space to create a DARPA for health, DARPA being the research institution that has given us the internet and the stealth fighter. And that ultimately was funded to the tune of multiple billions of dollars. Like that came from a proposal that we had um, helped to write, from two contributors, experts, and curated and got in front of the right folks, and ended up making real. And so my message from this that I took away and that I think we preach is that there is actually a way to shape public policy outcomes
Hmm.
that more people should be able to see themselves in. And so we spend a lot of time evangelizing that and providing pathways for more people to get involved. And it's how this is like you can see how this might complement some of the fellowship
Yeah.
opportunities that we're talking about, right?
Yeah, yeah, getting the right people in, but I think what you're really emphasizing is that the doing it at the right time is so important, and that makes so much sense that, when an administration's coming in, they want exciting things to work on, and so saying, "Here you go, on a platter," exactly, you'd
That's right.
rewritten it however many times, had however many experts working on it. That's yeah, it's really
That's
fantastic.
right.
Mhm,
I think one other piece of this that I would just underscore, um, and this is like some refinements of this overall model that I think are really valuable. Is that we have diagnosed, I think, a gap. Um, I think we're in a moment as a country where um, I think there's a lot of frustration that we're not getting out of government what we hope or expect it to deliver.
mhm,
Um, and I think that one of the reasons for that is that the bench of people who know how to do what I'm describing, who know how to make government move in a given direction, who have a command of policy, not like policy like you would learn in college or in a policy school, but policy as like a verb. Um, how to make change in this system. The number of people that know that is actually really quite small.
right, yeah,
And um, and so what I see often is that mostly we could be doing a lot better in our design of policy, in our implementation of policy. And I think there's lots of examples of this. And so um, part of the mission is that one of the um, ways in which we can improve and deliver a more responsive and effective government is actually just massively leveling up skilling um, the people who pass through in key roles and ultimately shape the way that it does anything that it's actually trying to deliver.
and so you're saying for that like, those are people within government, you're saying?
I think that we call this policy entrepreneurship,
Mhm,
and um, the the policy entrepreneurs, sometimes they're in government and they're policymakers.
mhm,
Sometimes they sit outside government at places like the Federation of American Scientists.
mhm.
Um, but these agents of change are the ones who are more often than not the catalysts for most of the most important policy work that you see showing up that some very senior and important person ultimately is celebrating and taking credit for. There's
Right.
usually somebody you've never heard of who had the instinct and the relentlessness to make it real.
Mhm.
Um, and so our view is that by inculcating more people in this general expertise, which is identifying policy windows, understanding the policy toolkit, and all of the different ways in which an idea can be advanced, whether it's through budget, regulation, other stuff that gets really specific really quickly. That by increasing the number of people who understand those things and want to use it to advance science and tech for good, um, we are going to see massive benefits, including by shaping the ultimate um, makeup of who's in government, in policy roles, and doing this work within the walls of key rooms that we may not ourselves be in. So I think it's actually both.
Yeah. No, it makes complete sense. It's like really democratizing the
That's
policymaking
right.
process. Yeah. No, that's great. One question I can't really wrap my mind around is, I mean, you're talking about getting experts, into either those roles or just informing people on what policy should look like or what the actual science behind it is. How do you find those scientists? Like, how do you know who the expert is? Are they all like members of FAS or how does that work?
Um, so early on, uh, we were doing more spearfishing than putting out more open calls because we were trying to figure out how this model worked. And so we would go with experts that we knew had ideas. I'll say that this approach really started from my experience in government in the White House because one of the things that is a hallmark of policymaking in places like that is that um, most of the best ideas come from someone else. And what you realize very quickly is that your job is to develop a filter when you're in one of those policymaking seats,
Hmm.
is to develop a filter for what's a good idea that's worth working on, that um, that might be actionable, that where you can run with it. And so, um, to give you an example, like uh, our office, at the Office of Science and Technology Policy, um, um, was the engine, not me personally, but others were the engine behind President Obama's BRAIN initiative,
Hmm.
which um, the the vision was to do for the human brain what the Human Genome Project did for the genome.
This is so funny. We actually just had Tom Khalil on, who also,
Great.
yeah. Tell me more about the Brain Initiative from
But
your
the idea
perspective.
that the specific, so Tom is the policy entrepreneur behind this.
Hmm.
But, um, the idea came from a Columbia University academic who was the, like, guiding, subject matter expert, whose insights about the, um, the neuroscience and, space, informed and drove this and catalyzed it at the beginning, and it evolved from there. So I think, like, there are these examples where going and finding the foremost expert on a topic is actually a really great way, to say, "Hey, look, um, you're doing important work. It's has broad application. Are you working on a policy agenda?" So, like, that's sort of approach one. And more often than not, like, because the policy that I'm describing is, um, verb not noun, and requires, like, a deep expertise of the different levers at the disposal of anybody in Congress or in the White House or in an agency, the answer is usually, like, they've taken some meetings with people who reached out, but they have no idea where they went because it's a
Hmm.
black box and they have a day job. So there's, like, this missing gap of bridging from deep expertise that have ideas whose time has come,
Hmm.
into the policy apparatus, whether that's writing memos or being relentless on their behalf, et cetera. We have found that there is a vast opportunity to get really promising good ideas, entirely outside of just those, like, obvious luminaries. One, what we call this a policy sprint, where we put out a call for ideas. We did this a few years ago in partnership with Matt Iglesias of Slow Boring, the journalist, on housing policy. So folks in the Biden White House, um, were looking for ideas that were still low hanging fruit, things that they had not
Hmm.
been able to cover on, relaxing slide constraints on housing, because it's not entirely obvious what the federal government can do on housing. It's mostly a local issue.
Hmm.
Um, and so we said, let's see what's out there. And so we worked with Matt to get the word out that we were gonna um, we were gonna collect a bunch of proposals, and we'd pick, like, the 10 best, and we'd bring them to DC to do a showcase with our team, with Matt, and with policymakers and government who would be in the audience. So it's sort of like a demo day or like a startup pitch competition for policy. And, it turns out that there are people, some of them are terminally online, and some of them are just like really have a lot of free time. And some of them are like local council members
Yeah.
in places across the country who have been sitting there, stewing on some really promising ideas that they wish the federal government would take on, and their ideas show up in venues like this. So that's like the second example is, like, if you are targeted and specific and you have a thesis,
Hmm.
they're out there that are responsive. And the last example I think is, it's not always that easy. So a lot of what the a lot of current reflection about failings of some of the major pieces of legislation that were implemented by the Biden administration revolve around, um, not just the pace of money moving out the door, but challenges related to community engagement. Were these grants and programs actually tailored to community needs? And so I think in some cases, doing that better or designing policies more effectively requires a much more proactive approach at democratizing input on the front end. And so, um, you can't just say, "Hey, we put it up on our website on FAS." Like, I don't know why people, in underserved communities aren't reaching out with their ideas. But, like, there are actual community-informed methods that we've been experimenting with that I think can be helpful here that are needed because, you're gonna get a skewed sample of folks who raise their hand.
Definitely. I did really want to ask you about a new spearheaded joint effort that you started with Metro Lab to bring science driven policy into civic life. It seems like that, is coming from a lot of your realizations in the past of really needing community input into federal making. I guess when I initially read about this, I assumed it was like bringing science at, deliverables into local communities. But is it also trying to help that to inform federal policies?
So it is, it's creating, yes, so what you're referring to is, we recently, um, acquired Metro Lab Network, which is a nonprofit, that, has focused on, um, bringing, um, technical academic expertise into the civic context. So, maybe in short, like, universities and the academics that sit in communities should be working on behalf of their communities. And actually that's like a concept that's a little bit easier in principle than it is in practice.
Hmm.
Because just for example, academics often want to work on a certain thing, and their tendency may be to push a new breakthrough innovation or technology or research trajectory, but policymakers are like, hey, we're trying to fix potholes, like what are we doing here? So MetroLab has found a model that stitches together these relationships effectively at the local level. Um, and they were looking for deeper connectivity to our network of expertise and scientists at FAS and our federal work because, um, as you rightly described, there's like a bidirectional imperative here that is often getting missed. And so, um, informing some of the federal policy with insights that they're gathering on the ground is one piece of it. Another piece of it is um, what I just described for you in the day one project and this idea of what is an agenda setting policy exercise for federal policymakers. Like that is something that nobody's really doing at the civic at the local level. And so we are eager to equip mayors with a meaningful agenda that harnesses science and technology for their own goals and to benefit their communities. And so some of these similar agenda setting policy moves is exactly what we're interested in bringing into that context because like it works as I've described.
Oh, that's great. Are there any specific applications of science and technology policy you're hoping that this will inform, like any certain issue areas?
So there's a bunch on. I mean, so in some sense, the local policymakers are ones who um, um, drive because the only way that this really works is if policymakers are offering demand signals. AI and data governance, the intersection of energy and AI and data centers, so topics that are familiar to you and to our community, but where there's actually the folks in these roles are even more capacity constrained, and there's actually not that many resources available. So a bunch of topics related to that, as well as things like autonomous vehicles and like policies to support effective rollout, et cetera.
Got it. You're based in DC, right?
Yeah, we are.
Have you seen the Waymos driving around? Last time I was
Yes,
there, I saw it's crazy.
I know. Well, I've been in them in San Francisco. It's quite a disorienting experience.
Yeah, I went in one in Austin. It's kind of funny how many people stare at you while you're in them. But yeah, it definitely seems like a place where you'd want community input on the rollout of a big tech piece.
Yeah, I mean, so exactly. So I mean,
Mhm.
there's a part of me that's like, I have young kids, and I just need this to be mainstream by the time they're old enough, so I'm not like driving to soccer practice,
Yeah.
like, you know. But there's another part of me that's like, if you just think about like curb space,
Mhm.
I mean, this stuff gets like pretty granular pretty quickly. But um, here in DC, uh, there's like the curb space is predominantly devoted to parking, and that like need not be so. And you could imagine all these other uses. We saw some experimentation during the pandemic, but I think like these are actual design and policy questions where there are mayors out there that say, "Look, I would like to be the test bed, and I would like to um, figure out the suite of policies that would allow for all of these things to be implemented in a way that fosters more effective, deployment of autonomous vehicles, but with the right safeguards in place." And I think like that, those are the kinds of areas where we were excited to be digging in.
Yeah, definitely. I want to get out of maybe slightly less granular back to more broad FAS. You guys are working on so many different things. I mean, you've brought up climate, AI, wildfire. How do you pick what issue areas to work on? Or is it just like whatever we can get experts in, we want them publishing and writing about things?
So we are. There's a couple answers to this, but I'd say that the core of it um, is that we are looking for topics where they are self-evidently important. That this would like if we were to make progress on an issue, it would matter not just because we got to win, but that it would be have some broader impact on society. Um, we are also looking for topics that are just not uh, really well and effectively covered by someone else, where
Mhm.
there's headroom for growth, or there's a deep need for our model of policy entrepreneurship because there's like a rabbit in there somewhere. So an example would be um, the wildfire work that we do. Um, I did not, when I came to FAS, say I think we should be one of the leading wildfire policy organizations in the United States. Um, but we ultimately embarked on a scoping journey on this topic to figure out if we should dive in more comprehensively. Um, and what we realized was that it had these characteristics that, um, you know, you can see that the scourge of mega fires is only growing. Um, the response in Washington and the policy apparatus and the infrastructure, there's like so much opportunity for headroom and growth, and a need to rebalance and evolve our posture. And yet, looking around, like even though a bunch of, I should say, Republican delegations and senators are banging the table on this issue, actually, not that much attention in Washington was focused on it. So we look for issues like that. There are that's how we select new issues. There are some
Interesting.
issues that are just critically important that we work on: climate, STEM, and science policy. And one that we've carried with us for our 80-year history, which is work on nuclear weapons,
Mhm.
because that's tied up in our founding story.
Yeah, I'd
Um,
actually I've been familiar with FAS for a long time, had never known the fact. Can you tell the founding story? I think it's so fascinating.
yeah, so we started, and it's sort of hard because you have to put yourself in the mind of you have to like occupy a 1945 mindset. And it's a little easier if you've seen Oppenheimer because our story is tied up in the story that's told in that movie.
Mhm.
So the scientists who were behind the Manhattan Project um, realized that they had unleashed something on the world that had uh, tremendous power, both for good but also tremendous risk. And as they saw um, political debates and policy discourse play out, um, they had a deep concern that these conversations were playing out um, without technical expertise in the room. And they founded FAS um, as a platform. And the idea was to serve as a bridge from technical communities. In this initial instance, the community of physicists who had both been directly a part of the Manhattan Project. I have letters in our archives from Albert Einstein on our letterhead, weighing in on public policy issues. So this was like truly a vehicle. And what's crazy is um, they wanted to speak with one voice. And so there was at a time before email, they were trading letters back and forth about what position they should take about some issue of nuclear nonproliferation. It was like tremendously transaction cost late. I mean, can't imagine how long it took. It would be so frustrating. But I mean, getting these like luminaries to respond to these letters and telegrams. Um, but that was the initial idea, was that we needed more apparatus and platforms to bring that expertise to bear. Um, on the most important issues of the day, what started with nuclear weapons it quickly evolved to other issues. But I think we carry with us this sense that um, we're looking at both potential risks, where we think the community's wisdom is really important, and but also opportunities for progress in some of the areas that I was just describing.
Yeah, it's such a novel beginning. Is there how do you keep that, like, activist spirit alive, would you say, at FAS?
Well, I think that what we do, we take our voice really seriously. You know, we have, to this day, we've always been an organization that um, has taken a nonpartisan stance, working on behalf of a community of scientists. Like, so we're loyal to evidence. We are loyal to a vision of a world that is free from the scourge of nuclear weapons, but also where science and technology are enhancing a whole host of aspects of our lives. And we've always tried to ensure that we're um, um, beyond reproach in the expertise and the evidence that we are presenting on any given issue. And so, we typically haven't taken funds from corporate interests,
Mhm.
and for a long time we've relied on individual donors who have considered themselves aligned with the vision of this organization and its history. And so I think it's partially holding ourselves to a standard, frankly, when we think about what our policy posture is and what work we should do, we do ask ourselves, what would the founders have done here?
Wow.
And it doesn't always guide us, because I think we live in a very different world, and
Yeah.
there's, but I do think, like, it's relevant to the way in which we approach issues, because I think that their general overall guidance
Mhm.
and policy frameworks do hold up to this day.
Ah, that's really incredible. I think they'd be proud of the work you guys are doing. Did you rent out a theater and bring everyone to see Oppenheimer together?
Well, we thought about doing that, actually, um, and we did something even better, actually.
Was it
What
the
we did
Barbie Oppenheimer marathon instead?
close. No, no, no. What we did was, I guess, so this organization's gone through a number of different chapters,
Mhm.
and like most fledgling small, we're a small but mighty nonprofit. Like, over the course of 80 years, um, it's a little bit of an archaeology expedition to figure out, what is uh what happened in the past. So we use, like, the internet wayback machine, like, to find things that we used to do. And one of the things that we stumbled upon was the FAS Public Service Awards. And so this was an award that we'd given, um, um, and had given it until about 10 years ago, but for decades. And people like Carl Sagan, um, Ted Kennedy, um, and and um, and others who had made some substantial contribution at the nexus of science and public policy, we would give this out annually. Um, so we decided that the year that Oppenheimer came out, we decided that we would actually um, uh, bring that award back. And so we held an award ceremony, a big gala, where we gave out a number of awards, but this was actually quite a milestone for us, because one of the first recipient was um, Chuck Schumer and Todd Young, the senators,
Mhm.
for their work on chips and science. their role in passing what was the most significant piece of science legislation in 10 years.
Yeah.
And their bipartisan work at a time when that's like really rare. So we had them up on stage talking about this. Um, we actually gave an award, a new award called a Policy Entrepreneurship Award, to an up and coming policy entrepreneur. Um, and we gave the last award to Christopher Nolan
Oh,
uh,
wow.
for his work in telling this story. And he came to DC for this event, and described some of his own vision and thinking around the issues and the policy issues that it surfaced related to nuclear weapons. So for us, this was like a pretty important milestone and a celebration of both where we'd been and where we're going.
Yeah. Wow, that is so cool. Definitely, definitely better than renting out a theater. What an awesome experience. Well, that's great. Well, we're getting close to the end of time. I have a couple other questions. One, for listeners inspired by FAS's mission, what steps would you say everyday people could take to make science informed policy a bigger part of civic life?
So I think that the number one thing I'd highlight here is that um, lots of people work with us um, on a part-time basis. It's as easy as putting forward an idea that you're excited about, and if you're willing to do some of the legwork, we love working with people who are eager to be policy entrepreneurs themselves. And so there's a bunch of different ways to do that. One is just like submitting and writing a paper and then iterating with us. Another is these periodic fellowship opportunities we have, which are part-time in nature, but can be really valuable. Um, I think that we're going to need, particularly on artificial intelligence, we're going to need many more uh, contributors for a whole host of reasons. And um, I think there's lots of people out there, including the kinds of people that listen to podcasts like this, who are AI policy curious and have like the core enthusiasm, initiative, and probably some measure of technical background that would make them a really compelling contributor to this space. And we actually need more help because we are hurtling into an uncertain future, and there's lots and lots of work to do. Um, I think I think more broadly on science, and civic life, um, I would be remiss if I didn't highlight that, like, we are in the middle of a deep and significant challenge, related to funding cuts and related to policies, that this administration has advanced, in some domains that actually risk undermining a lot of what, our entire, research ecosystem has depended on. And so I view competition with China at risk. I view breakthrough um, research innovations at risk. And so there's actually, this is a moment for greater civic activism, including by like calling your reps.
Mhm.
It actually can matter. And I don't mean this in like a partisan way. It's just highlighting what is so important about um, all of this work that the federal government underpins, because it actually shows up in lots of ways, seen and unseen, and in places around the country that I think more people need to be calling the attention of policymakers to the urgency of fighting on behalf of what's great about the American, what I think of as the American miracle machine.
Well, great. Thank you for both of those call outs. Lastly, some of the Accelerate Science Now Coalition partners have started a book club, and we're always taking recommendations. So I would love to know if there's a book or journal or article that has had a really big impact on you from a science policy perspective.
Oh, um, that is a good one. I thought that the Ideas Factory, which is a book about the book about Bell Labs and and all of the unimaginable breakthroughs that Bell Labs have given the world. It's a fascinating book, probably about 15 years old now, But it is a treatise on what it takes for breakthrough science to happen, from an era that is different than our own, but that should inform how we think about building new institutions in an era of AI, where we need to be thinking about um, um, i- reshaping how all of this is actually pursued.
Oh, great. Well, 15 years is fine. I think everything we've read so far has been 50 to 80 years old, so that'll
Right.
feel modern.
That's great.
Great. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us today, Dan. This was a really great conversation, and I really enjoyed learning more about FAS.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
You've been listening to Accelerate Science Now. I'm your host, Adeline DeYoung. This show is produced by Kindred Subjects, Accelerate Science Now, and Seed AI. Our executive producers are Josh New and Austin Carson. Special thanks to Kevin King for editing and production. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.